have the time to listen to me grind. Take down the film watchers and nerds all at once. I am one of those skeptical of status quo.
Hey, day 2 of the coronavirus outbreak. No, obviously everyone's addressing it, I guess. Podcasts and videos. Look, this is fantasy football content. We're not going to. It's not because it isn't impacting our lives or everyone else's lives. It's because fantasy football is a place to come for fun. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. So it's a place away from that. Having said that, locked in our house. To be honest, we're all homebodies anyway, so we're not seeing a lot of difference. But maybe a little extra time for more content. Speaking of which, one of the players I've been asked to make a video on by my Patreons is Chase Claypool. Really interesting statistical profile from college. Came up higher in my model recently because of a change I made, so I want to look at that and then do just a brief evaluation, what I think of him, where I'm at, where DLF ranks have him, how I should be valuing him right now before the draft. Obviously the draft's going to affect a lot. So, yeah, let's get into it. If anyone has any questions, other players I want to talk about, there's a comment section down below. You can hit me up on Patreon. I'm on Twitter constantly, even without being, quarantined. And I'm not. I'm just housebound like everyone else. So, yeah, let's see. Where should we go here? Start here. My whole database is pinned to my Twitter timeline right here. It's the very first tweet. You get sent to a Patreon page. Just thought I'd start doing this occasionally so people know where to find it. It's on a Patreon page, but my market share database for prospects dating all the way back to 2003 is free. So unlike most of the stuff I do, so if you click on that link on Patreon, you get taken straight to it. Get a link to some other databases, which are mostly Patreon only. But my main one, the one I spend most of the time talking about, is all free, and all the data is right here. If you give it a second, wait, there it is. So you can see all prospects going back to 2003 across the same stats and everything else that I talk about. We've also got a small hit rate table by conference. This is just wide receiver right now. You can also see some market share thresholds, so the percentage of receiving yards that players typically get as a wide receiver 1 in those conferences, and there's some other stuff in there too, but this is the database I'm typically talking about, so I thought I'd point that out. Alright, this is my version of it. You can make a copy of it in the file menu, download it, export it to your own Google Drive, whatever, and then play around with it as much as you want. One of the things that I do is put in these rows are at the top. The top one is actually the average for players, with wide receivers I do the average for players with at least one top 24 season. The second tab here is the RSQ, or the R squared, how predictive it is of fantasy points. Now, where I haven't selected a certain sample that's just run on everyone, the RSQ results are a little suspect, but it gives me a decent idea just while scanning across it, just in case you're wondering what those two things are up there. Alright, so Chase Claypool, here's his stat line right here, running across the entire wide receiver tab. He's someone that I wasn't particularly high on, to be honest with you. Obviously, we like really big players because they can provide a lot of upside. We're all secretly just hoping that Calvin Johnson comes back into the league, incarnated in someone else. And Chase Claypool actually scored the highest in my, what's essentially a Calvin Johnson index, or my combine score model, which ranks the most P, or the highest probability to have relevance variables, against each other in comparison to past players. Chase Claypool is the most Calvin Johnson physically built, but as you can see, he's definitely not Calvin Johnson. I mean, 4'3" is pretty good for his size. His BMI is pretty short, but he's 76 inches tall, 238 pounds. He's pretty much a monster. He's got a great height adjusted and weight adjusted speed score because of it. Oh, sorry. I forget my face is in the way sometimes. Right there. So you can see his height adjusted and weight adjusted speed score, his hand size, and everything else. Now, if you've paid attention to anything I've ever put out, I don't weight the combine particularly highly, but it is nice to know what the player looks like, how he's physically built, how that might affect how he can play in the NFL. Now, my wide receiver model, I recently adjusted for games played. I have something called the Calvin Ridley rule, which could also be the AJ Green rule or a whole bunch of other players, to be honest. But Calvin Ridley rule just rolls right off the tongue, so I call it that. There's also a player where I really started employing it. If a player plays less than 6 games in a season, I just take that season out of all the statistics models that I'm calculating. Now, all his raw statistics and market share are in the database if you just want to see them and do something different with them. But when you're looking at, if you're looking at, I should say, my pre-draft, post-draft model results and my production score results, I remove seasons where a player doesn't play at least 6 games, and so they're taken out of it. And that's what I recently did for the pre-draft model. It improved Chase Claypool's production score enough, and therefore his pre-draft score enough that he actually came up top 12. Yeah, he came up 9th in my pre-draft model. Now, if you want to see how effective the pre-draft model is, what I really suggest is you just skim through the database looking at past years, who comes high, who comes low. There is an R squared to it, obviously, in my formula and results tab, and it's pretty good, especially pre-draft. Yeah, that's the average score that they got. So it's not RSQ. It's the average. The RSQ is on the top round. So yeah, just with a mega sample here, it's looking at 60% predictiveness. For reference, draft capital with a mega sample like this is probably running anywhere between 27 or 32%. So it's like half of just knowing what the draft capital is, and you should adjust for that effectively. But where you shouldn't be drafting in rookie drafts right now, it shouldn't be a big factor. I've also just added this tab right here just for reference while I'm writing articles and things. I want to know where DLF has them. According to DLF consensus ranks right now, Chase Claypool is a wide receiver 17. Now, based on that rank, I want to be a bit higher than wide receiver 17 since he's coming out 9th in my model. But Chase Claypool actually triggers one of those trope narratives that I was talking about in one of my past videos about how to look for breakouts and busts at the wide receiver position. And the most useful thing I have for that in a single numerical number is this production score right here. You can see how he's got a minus 3.3 score. The average for top players with good seasons essentially in the NFL is around 0. 0 is a perfect score. Above that is good. Below that is bad because they don't look a lot like players who have had top 24 or multiple top 24 seasons before. All right, it's not the most predictive thing I've created anymore. It used to be for a while, but it's changed since I've gotten better and added some more stuff. But the RSQ is actually higher than 10% if you actually choose a decent scale. So I thought I'd mention that too. The prediction score is pretty good, but the way I think you should view it is essentially, do I have any of them easy to hand? Probably not. Let me see here. Let me skip around. It's basically a numerical description of the tropes that I like to look for, but also some graphs that I post. If I can find it real quick. Fantasy data, college data. Sorry, I got way too many spreadsheets rolling around in here. Okay, let's look at AJ Brown. Oh, sorry, you can't see it. Yeah. Right here. These graphs that you see me posting, this is just market share of yards, not dominator rating, which I actually find to be slightly more predictive once adjusted by age, but market share of yards is just a good clean way of looking at it because you're not getting some of the variance of touchdowns. So the production score is basically a numerical description of how far below or above this average yard for good wide receivers in the NFL actually looks like in a single number. It takes the distance between the average and the player at each year and then multiplies it by how predictive that age season is to predicting wide receivers in the NFL. So it kind of creates a natural weighting for how they did perform in this way of looking at players. Unfortunately, I'm not able to build anything sophisticated enough as, frankly, just looking. And so my model is able to identify that he's 3% below average, but it doesn't know how that 3% is made. So the way I combat that is actually by literally going and looking at his season. So if you look at his dominator rating here, you see his best season, the season that he's actually at average, is actually at age 21. Now the production score stat metric, whatever the hell it is, actually weights seasons more valuable the older a player gets, essentially because the older you get, the more you're meant to produce. And so if you're producing above the average at age 21 or even 22, it wants to multiply it by excessive amounts or more because it's worth more that you are over that trend line. And so it's got a little bit of a fault in that. But one of the things that I constantly talk about is how breaking out at a later age is a negative sign. Over the age of 19, you really have to dig into the profile. You have to do that anyway, but you really have to be concerned about the age at which they produced. And the Calvin Ridley rule is really the only things that saves them. If they don't play a lot before the age of 20, we really just write it off and say we don't know. So there's more of a mystery, but we just take their stats as read. Now, Chase Claypool had 2 seasons with playing 6 games or more where he was extremely below average. At age 21, he comes up to the average of top 24 players in the NFL at age 21 in college. We see a similar thing if we look at his efficiency. So over here I've got the yards per team pass attempt above the team's average. So how much extra value he was adding per pass attempt for the entire team. And you see that he's drastically below what you'd expect for wide receivers who are going to be good in the NFL until he gets to year 2, and then he's slightly above the average. Now that's all I try to encapsulate all of that in something called an efficiency score, which is literally their average yards above team average, above the team's average. And you can see why I just call it an efficiency score. In my model section of my database, and you can see that, you know, top 24 wide receivers tend to average about 1.65 yards above their team's average, and Chase Claypool is down here at 1.2, and that's because those 2 years he was drastically below the average, and then the third year he played more than 6 games, he was slightly above the average of top 24 wide receivers. So as a whole, he was remarkably inefficient compared to good players in the NFL while in college. So that's the way I look at production score and efficiency score, and that's what the 2 numbers are telling you. He's a late breakout. He's below efficient. He also triggers one of my personal tropes, one of the things I like to look for, where he's playing before the age of 21, but he only breaks out at 21. One of the reasons I think that works is because players tend to get better in college, but seniors often get difference. They know the playbook better, they're bigger, they're more physically developed. That definitely goes along with Chase Claypool, right? And so they give them a little bit more opportunity as the seniors on the team, as the players more likely to leave, so on and so forth. There's something I call senior difference. So a lot of players do exceptionally better in their age 21 or 2 seasons than they do 18, 19, or 20 because the team is leaning on them for ancillary reasons, not because anything they're attracting to them with their talent. Now that sounds a little harsh to Chase Claypool, but I do want to note that I want to be higher than wide receiver 17 on him as he's ranked in DLF ranks right now. But that all depends on where he gets valued after the draft. And the player I would comp Chase Claypool to if I'm looking for a success story is Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin also had that late breakout problem, did find some success in the NFL, and honestly it'd be a little disingenuous to say he couldn't have had more if his career didn't play out the way it did, right? He eventually, right now I think he's out of the league after being traded from or leaving the Carolina Panthers before his rookie contract really finished off, so maybe it could have been slightly better. But I think Chase Claypool, this monster, Kelvin Benjamin was a very big guy. Kelvin Benjamin got first-round draft capital, and since he's getting a positive score based on his averages for my pre-draft model, I'm going to have to value that. But I think first-round draft capital isn't going to happen for Chase Claypool, which is actually a positive thing. If I can take Chase Claypool in the 3rd year as a flyer and everyone else I like better is off the board, I'm really interested in that athletic and that size upside, right? If he's in a good landing spot with decent draft capital. If he starts getting taken in the 2nd round before we even know his draft capital, I'm probably fading him for other players that I like their production profile more. If he gets taken in the 1st round, he's probably going to shoot up boards a lot more than I can follow. And so other people are going to take him, hoping that he can follow a Kelvin Benjamin success archetype, right? I'm looking for other players. I'm looking for players that are able to distance themselves before they were getting senior difference in my 1st round. I'm not going to risk a Chase Claypool there. But if he continues to be this 2nd, really 3rd tier wide receiver in rookie ranks right now, I'm probably going to end up with some Chase Claypool and be happy with it. Right now I have him in that tier right down here. Where's Chase Claypool? In terms of my wide receiver ranks. Why am I not seeing Chase? Oh, that's because I put him in his tight end ranks. I did have Chase Claypool in this bottom tier of players I'm interested in, but only if there's no one else really. Someone that has upside, I think, but doesn't look likely to be good in the NFL for one reason or another. I'm interested in, but I need the draft to go the right way. I need the dynasty value to go the right way for me to end up with a lot of them. The reason I've got him in the tight end ranks right now is because I want to rank him higher than I would ordinarily, especially since he came up high in my model, and also brings up one other feature of this player's profile. I keep getting told he's going to convert to tight end, or he might convert to tight end. Now, unlike with a lot of narratives, I think that would make a lot of sense for Chase Claypool, given his size, given that late breakout age, and given the crunch at the wide receiver talent position right now. Like, there's a lot of wide receivers coming out in this year's draft. Maybe he feels like he'd have a better shot going as a tight end. Chase Claypool actually profiles as the clearest, as the number one tight end if his stats were graded in my tight end pre-draft model, as you can see right here. I don't have a combine score for him because he didn't perform the tests that I use for tight ends in that combine model for tight ends. Now, here's the thing I would say about this, and I was just talking about it with Tom Kissingberry from DLF and also from England, if you're aware of him. I worry about different because the NFL tends not to like different. It tends to like the same. It tends to like to know what to expect. Chase Claypool, if he switches to tight end, it's not just different wide receiver. Tight end is a very different position. It takes longer to learn the position as a tight end when you go to the NFL, so that their breakout seasons are significantly past wide receiver breakout seasons. In other words, wide receivers typically break out year 1, year 2, or year 3, year 2 and 3 being the most common. Tight end breakout seasons happen year 3 and 4, or from the ages of around 25 to 26, based on the way I've studied it. I know RotoViz says the second season is also most likely for tight ends to break out in the NFL. Looking by age, I think they've got some... I judge it a little differently. I'm not going to tell you RotoViz is wrong, because RotoViz is usually right? But if you look at it by age, most players that break out are around age 25, 26. And players come into the league at different ages, which it shifts how old they are when you get to age 20, when you get to your second season. And I think it's much more likely that we should bet on age for maturity and experience factors when it comes to the tight end position. The reason for that is the tight end position is a very different position in the NFL. There's a lot more to learn. It's a lot harder to catch up with, and you have to be good at a variety of different skills. You don't really need to be excellent at for wide receiver. Blocking comes to mind, but let's not get into that argument with Zach Ertz and Austin Hooper right now. So my concern is Chase Claypool's wide receiver stats obviously look great when you compare him to tight end, but tight ends play a different role. They tend to get lower volume, and that's why he's coming up so high in my tight end model. The question, if Chase Claypool converts, is one, if an NFL team is going to take that gambit and actually try to teach a player a new position, which they typically don't, and two, how well is he going to be able to learn that role? I don't know, because I have no tight end experience in his history that I can judge, that I can evaluate. I only have history of him playing wide receiver, and that's a different thing. So while I'd be excited for Chase Claypool to convert positions, I think he would be a later breakout at best. I think his value would be more likely to tank before he got good. Darren Waller was in and out of fantasy relevance, and I know he had substance abuse problems, and that's a different thing, but that's the kind of path I would expect for a Claypool if he's switching positions to try and become a successful tight end in the NFL. For fantasy. For playing real football is a very different conversation, and one I'm not qualified to speak on. I'm sure he can be a very useful NFL player for fantasy purposes, looking at it through that minute lens. I think he looks like a risk if he's valued above a third-round pick in rookie drafts as a wide receiver and as a tight end, I'm interested in him, but it's going to be a very long wait, I think, before he ever does anything for fantasy. And that means I'm probably not drafting him unless I just have deep bench space or a taxi squad in my 4th, 5th rounds, and I can add him and hold him there and forget about him for a few years and then check back in year 4. Where is he? What team's he on? I've completely forgotten about this guy. So that's my Chase Claypool. I know there's a lot of excitement about him, and let's be honest, Kelvin Benjamin and other exceptions to the late breakout rule do provide a bit of hope. Again, my pre-draft model likes him because his average production looks pretty good. It puts him up there with Gandy Golden, who I'm a really big fan of. The difference is that Chase Claypool did really well late, and he spent 2 years playing 4 seasons being bad, which means, to my eye, that looks like senior difference much more than him tracking opportunity and creating production because of his innate talent. I'm hoping to be wrong, because I'm hoping all these guys hit, obviously. But that's the way I look at Chase Claypool. I'm sorry if anyone's really, really excited about him and didn't want to hear me not say really, really excited things about him. But again, I do think he has significant upside, but I think the downside is more likely. And I really don't want him, like I might take him in the late 2nd. But right now, this class is looking so deep, depending on what the draft does to us, it will be hard for me to take him there too. But yeah, 2nd round pick, if you really like him, I think is fair. But that's paying an iron price for that type of player, right? Just because of this breakout trope, and it's so successful at spotting busts. And if Chase Claypool was like the wide receiver of the moment right now, if everyone wanted to take him in 1st round drafts, I would be talking a lot more negatively. It's where he's kind of one of these bottom, wide receiver 17 rungs, that it makes that potential upside worth it. Like, I'd be interested in him at this value. If it rises much into our rookie drafts and with whatever happens in the draft, then I'm gonna come down on him compared to the consensus average. All right, I think that about wraps it up with Chase Claypool. Hope it was interesting. If you want to see all his stats and come up with a different opinion, I'm all for that. Let me know what it is. Follow the link and check out my database or someone else's. It's fine. You don't have to use mine, but I enjoy it when people do. Obviously, let me know what you think. Comment section down below. Hit me up on Twitter, Patreon, wherever. I'm pretty contactable. Hope you're safe. Hope your hands are washed. Hope your family's in a good state too. I will talk to you again next time. The next time someone suggests a rookie to evaluate, or an NFL player for that matter. Thanks again, and I will see you then. Thanks again, and I will see you then. I gotta get better at this sign-off thing. Anyway, thanks. See you next time. Bye.
Do you have the time to listen to me grind?